Another day, another goalless match. We're alive to talk about it though, Santi. Did you get a good night's rest after this one?
Yes, but obviously, it's difficult when you go 3 games at home winless, and yeah, clean sheet. But at this point of the season, you have to start getting 3 points in these home games, especially against some Portland, who was just 3 points above you on the table. So,
Yeah,
but
I just wonder how much longer we're gonna be going through this talking about you have to start, and then
yeah,
are we at the point, or are we gonna get to the point where we're just going to have to say, all right, we've dropped too many points and it's 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 past time to start getting 3 points at home?
yeah, possibly. I think so. Next game is away, and then the next two after that are at home.
Mhm.
Basically, after that, depending on how things go, yeah, we I think we will be at that point.
So I mean, Leagues Cup is a natural like evaluation point, right? Because you're over halfway through at that point, and there's a very finite amount of games after that you can even pick up points.
Yeah, I would say even earlier because last year Leagues Cup, after the break, the team still had 13 games. This year it will only be 9. So
Mm.
I
Yeah,
think
it's true.
by then, if you are still like 11, 12 position, and at that point you may be like 5, 6 points away from 9, which is still not bad, but then you have to pick up a lot of points and wait for other results.
You know what, the might as well start off with like one of the worst stats that we have is we are now tied with the fewest wins in the entire league.
Oh my god,
Isn't
that's
that
crazy.
is that awful? I mean, like we're gonna look for some positives to get into this once we start recording, but good night. I was scrolling down through the because you mentioned those 2 games, and it's Colorado and Atlanta at home, and Colorado's had a decent season. I think, they might have performed to their expectations because they were an awful team last year that improved, but Atlanta has fallen off the radar, and even Atlanta has more wins than us. So
Yeah. The thing is, Atlanta just let their coach
they did,
go,
yeah,
so
Gonzalo Pineda.
they will have that like new coach or interim coach, whatever, like boost.
But
So
yeah, the bump, yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
so
I forgot to
we'll
hit
see.
go live over on Instagram. There we go.
Mm.
Good thing I caught that. Alright. You ready to get going on this one?
Let's do it.
Alright. Grab your coffees. Welcome in everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined as always by my friend in soccer, Santiago Beltran, for a more traditional Flyover fallout after Phil took the reins for me being on vacation last week. Unfortunately, we're back to talk about another goalless match. This one was St. Louis City drawing the Portland Timbers 0-0 at home on a match that everybody thought really was ready-made for a goal fest. Ready-made, had all the workings of a real highlight reel type match, and on a week where the MLS match week was only 4 matches, I think there was a really big opportunity to spotlight things for St. Louis and continue what they had started to build upon with Miami, but that wasn't the case. Wasn't to be on this one. Before we get into it all with our starting 11, Santi, how are you on this day after we're recording from the match?
Doing great, Matt, but a little concerned with the lack of goals, the lack of points. We're almost halfway through the season, and the team still hasn't been able to find the magic to score goals. Like a lot of possession on the opponent's half to the final third, but not enough scoring. So yeah, a little concern. Yeah, some positives from last night, like clean sheet against
Mhm.
a Portland team that it's very it's one of the top teams in scoring in the league. Not enough just because it was 1 point.
Yeah, and I think that is undershadowed a little bit. Obviously, the lack of scoring is what the takeaway is for this game, because if you don't score a goal, you're never going to win a match. It's pretty plain and simple as that. We are seeing consistency in the lineups, but we are not seeing consistency in the goal scoring. And I think that's the most frustrating thing is Bradley Carnell has this penchant, which is not abnormal. This is a very intelligent, a logical thing to do. Where if you have a lineup that works in one game, you're going to carry it forward to build momentum, keep the confidence going, and that's kind of what we did here. And we've done it before. That's why we had a string of 5 matches or so where we had the same lineup, because things were working to various extents, whether they were working through to the final shot, whether they were working defensively in the midfield, etc. And this match was no different in that regard, where you have a Miami game that you score 3 goals. You have 3, I would call them defensive lapses, or at least a few defensive lapses. One mental mistake on Marcanic last week that allowed a goal. You had a turnover in the midfield from Kajima, but you had enough against Miami where you said we were clinical in goal scoring. We tied ourselves for the most goals scored in any single match. We're carrying that lineup forward. And that's basically what we did. From the point Rasmus Alm left last week, this is the lineup we saw. Roman Berkey in net, Anthony Marcanic at left back, Joakim Nilsson and Tim Parker at center back, Thomas Totland, the right back, center mids of Chris Durkin and Edu Leuven, attacking mids of Celio Pompeu, Jose Kajima, Indiana Vasilev, and Klaus up top. We had it 11 for 11 on our projection. We thought this was a strong lineup that they would be carrying in, because Carnell was pretty positive about his comments after Kajima came in, and not only what he was able to do against Miami, rewarding him with this start at home, but everybody else. Indiana Vasilev is a consistent starter. Celio has played himself into an every match starting role. We know what we're going to get from these guys in Celio's clinical dribbling abilities on the left, Indy's ability to cut in from right, and what this means for Thomas Totland working his way to be able to cross the ball. Edu Leuven now back in the lineup, in a cemented his role back in there. It had all of the makings of a quality side that could build off of what we saw with Miami, no matter what Portland was going to throw at us. So initial thoughts on this lineup, and then what you ended up seeing.
Yeah, no, good lineup is what is the lineup that did had a good game against Miami. So carrying the momentum made sense. The other thing is with Rasmus Alm and Thomas Ostrak out due to injury. Now you don't have as many choices as you will have when you have a full lineup. But I like it. Kijima earned the minutes. We will. I know when we look at passing networks. I think it would be interesting to see where he was. But yeah, it makes sense to use what worked the last game. You had a good performance, and looking to carry that momentum into this game. That was a game that, in my opinion, was a 6-point game, and the team had to win to stay within distance in the playoff race. It wasn't, as you mentioned, it wasn't a full schedule yesterday, only 4 games, so the team stays in the same position. But I think it's a missed opportunity to gain some ground on the table.
That's the perfect way to put it, is missed opportunity. And I don't think there's any other way to look at it, because like we'll talk about later, St. Louis is still 2 games in hand with Portland and a game in hand against most teams. But we were talking off air before we started recording that you can only start saying these things. You can only say these things for so long about you need to turn it around and get 3 points at home. You need to pick up points against some of these opponents that are at or below you in the table, games in hand, all of these things that they have potential to be in your favor until you actually make good on these potentialities. And so far, St. Louis has not made good on any of these potentialities, whether it is holding winning positions like we lost 3 against Miami, whether it's scoring goals in general, especially after matches where we have had such a goal scoring outburst. We've scored 3 goals now 4 times in MLS play this year. And our follow-up matches to those, we scored 2 against DC United, but in the follow-up matches to the next 3, we've had goalless matches. We haven't done anything in response to those matches where we've scored 3 goals. And that's been the absolute most frustrating thing, is the consistency in the lineup is there to attempt to build on but you haven't had the results being produced at all.
Yeah, and you could say still a lot of games in the season, but we're almost halfway. So at one point you need to start getting 3 points, and just that stat you mentioned, the team being tied with fewest wins in the league. That's telling, you know.
It is. It is. 3 wins in the league is tied for the fewest in MLS. It's even less than Atlanta, like we were talking about earlier, and that's frustrating. Um, before we started recording this, my kids who I brought to the game last night, Santi, were losing their minds, and that's not
Mm.
abnormal for kids losing their minds in the morning. But it reminded me of how they were acting at the beginning of the game. They were interested. They were glued in. They were watching. They were excited. Eyes were focused, which is very rare for a 7 and a 4-year-old. And I bring that up because later in the game there was laziness. There was an uninterested quality of them in watching what was on the field. And so when I looked back at this, and we'll talk about some of the key moments and everything that goes into this, but when I look back, I have this correlation between what the club was doing on the field to keep the attention of a 7 and a 4-year-old early, and then what ended up happening later in the second half and later in the back half of the first half, and then into the second half, because the stats back it up, what the eye test was, what the interestedness of the kids were, and that's nothing. Like they didn't show enough in the second half. Whether you say they burned themselves out, they ran themselves out in the humid St. Louis weather, or whatever it was, I noticed a very clear difference between what St. Louis started out as versus what they ended up finishing with. And it started strong. It started with, I would call them fireworks, less than 3 minutes in, as Chris Durkin went down in the box. St. Louis had a good opportunity just a few minutes in. And on the ensuing counter, Joakim Nilsson tackled a guy at midfield, full body tackled, as the referee wasn't looking, was looking upfield. So you had these big moments, and it continued with these big moments. Like Tim Parker had an end line run a couple times early in the game. We're throwing bodies in the attacking half. We're getting the ball high. We might not have had any shots on goal with this, but it's pretty exciting soccer from that perspective, where we're at least creating some things and putting the ball in some dangerous areas. And that's ultimately what you have to do to start the match, at least start building those chances and getting the ball into places where you can eventually have those shots and quality shots, hopefully. But did you feel like the St. Louis City side had a good start to the game in what they needed to do? They needed to come out strong out of the gates, pushing the ball high up the field, making Portland feel uncomfortable or pushing them back. And do you think St. Louis was at least effective in the underlying game plan, if not what their shot opportunities were early?
Yeah, definitely started the game with a lot of intensity, and as you said, back and forth. Portland was also created some chances. Even I think it was like third, 4 minute.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Rodriguez has his only chance of the game, and a good save by Roman Berkey. But yeah, it was back and forth those first 10 minutes. But yeah, I thought the team was playing with that intensity. It usually plays at City Park at the beginning of the games, and it created some chances. Just some unfortunate things. Klaus had that goal called back because he was offside just by it was very close, and it was I was disappointed that it wasn't. It was obviously it was reviewed
Mm-hmm.
upstairs, but it wasn't. The referee wasn't called back to take a look at it.
Yeah, that was just 12 minutes in, and credit before the Klaus opportunity and his finishing in that play to Jose Kojima for forcing the turnover. I think that was, we wanted to see more of Jose Kojima because we knew what his capabilities were on and off the ball, and we got to see his off the ball abilities here, where he just put himself in the exact right space to intercept a pass, tip it to where Indiana Vassilev could get it to Klaus. And I don't know what anybody's view was on the sidelines, but from the end line, looking over that play, you could tell Klaus was offside. I haven't looked at the replay on Apple to see, but it really seemed like there was a clear enough picture right off the bat that it was even tough to celebrate the initial goal, because once you look over at the sideline official and you see your thrower flag up, you know that it's pretty obvious. And it's frustrating because I think I viewed it. I know these are bang bang plays, and I tend to give more credit because Klaus has mentioned this before, that it's in the moment and their minds are thinking a few different things at once. But yeah, I tend to think that if you're going to high press like City does, then one of the underlying things you have to have in your mind at all times is to be onside. And
Yeah.
that's why it was frustrating to me, because Kojima was, I would say, 5 to 10 yards away from the ball handler when he had a touch on this, when he intercepted it. And it bounced over to Indy. So it wasn't immediately bang, bang, where Kojima had the touch straight to Klaus. There was an interlude there. And in that time, Klaus couldn't get back on side to receive the pass. And that's the frustrating thing. And it's just one of those individual moments that, in a St. Louis City style, where Bradley Carnell harps on taking advantage of individual moments, this cannot happen. You cannot be called offside if you're going to do exactly what your system calls for you to do.
Yeah, just an unfortunate moment. Klaus couldn't get onside. Yeah, from the replay you can see it's close, but yeah, it looks at least when looking at the replay, yeah, it looks like it's offside. But I was still hoping that maybe the referee was gonna have to go look at it and at least think about it. But it was a very quick review, so a little bit of disappointing of disappointment after just that turnover, and it looked like things were going City's way, but back to the drawing board, and it's still a scoreless game, and was still a lot of time. And City had good momentum, as I mentioned. I like the way they started the game, creating some turnovers, limiting Portland on their attacks. Just knowing that Portland had so Portland has too many talented players, Evander, Jonathan Rodriguez, Santiago Moreno, and I think the team did a good job containing them, especially Thomas Totlands, who I'm sure we're going to talk about later, containing Cabecita Rodriguez.
Oh, absolutely. And that's underlying to all this. Like there's overt things, and there's almost things you take for granted. And I think the defensive work that St. Louis did, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, is a little bit taken for granted on these day after or a few days after thoughts that we have on this game. Not just for the work Roman Berkey did, but like you said, Thomas Tolland, and being able to shut down Rodriguez was one of the most key things to this match. Like we talked about Evander and what his role would be in this game, and you have to shut him down. And I feel that St. Louis did minimize his impact as well. But after the third minute shot that Rodriguez had, it was really nothing more from him, and it was very little more from the Portland Timbers overall. In the first half, they only had, I think, about 4 total shots. And that the last shot that they had came in around the 19th minute. The 14th, 18th, and 19th minute were their only shots. And it was a good sequence that Evander led. He had a good shot on target. David Ayala had another shot at 19 minutes, but then it was nothing. The Timbers didn't have a single shot after that point in the first half. St. Louis continued to pounce on this. St. Louis continued to have counters. They continued to have long balls where it would have opportunities, but they didn't have anything that would be, I would say, overly dangerous or threatening from a shot perspective in the first half. And in fact, to me, the most dangerous moment came after, not just from an Edu Leuven free kick at 31 minutes where he drew his own foul and he had a good shot. Durkin had a chance at a rebound, but the best chance for St. Louis came at 34 minutes. Edu Leuven has what I would call a 1v2 opportunity. And I saw this play out, watch the replay at 34 minutes because I could still see it in my mind. He had space in front of him. Portland was giving him space. They were not respecting Edu Leuven's ball handling abilities. And instead of making a pass, which so often what St. Louis will do in these situations is if they see a space taken in front of them at any depth, they'll pass the ball off and try to find a more direct to goal path to move. What Edu Leuven did is he saw the space and he took it. He invited Portland to actually defend him. And what happened when he did that was both defenders moved up to try and tackle Leuven, and Leuven slid a pretty beautiful through ball into Klaus, but Klaus wasn't able to get a single touch on it. And the ball by itself from Leuven's through ball rolled almost into goal. It was cleared at the goal line after having no touch from an attacking player from St. Louis. That's how close it was, that if Klaus had had any single touch on that ball, it would have gone in.
Yeah, that was hard to see the replay that he didn't touch it, and yeah, and then it was just it kept going, but it was too slow and enough time for Portland's defender to clear it. We were joking on the broadcast that if Portland had not cleared that ball, it would have been a Leuven goal from outside the box. It would have been a goal, but just looking at the circumstances, like a very circumstantial goal, like nothing, like no pace on that. That would have been like a shot from Leuven, no pace on it, and then it goes in. But yeah, it was frustrating to see that Klaus couldn't get um, part of his cleat on it to make it go a little bit faster and then go in. But yeah, it was frustrating to see for sure.
And I think that speaks to the weight of the pass by Leuven, right? How perfectly weighted he attempted to make it be so that Klaus could at least get some kind of a touch, because it didn't have enough pace to go into goal at all. I was impressed by Leuven's not just his awareness and his vision in drawing the defense in and what they gave him to be able to create that chance for himself to get a through ball in, but the pace he had on the ball as well. After that, Roman Bürki did have a pretty good, I think it was a save. They're not crediting him as a save in some of the stat sheets. 40 minutes, completely shuts down Antony in a 1v1 situation. I think Marcanic was higher up on the field centrally. Did you see this one where Bürki had that shot-stopping 1v1 on Antony almost at the halftime point?
Yes, I remember it, but yeah, I guess that one doesn't count as a save. He was just 1v1 and he basically got the ball, but yeah, Berkey again. He didn't have a lot of work last night, but when he was forced into this 1v1 situation, or even the shots that Portland had on goal, he was again very important for St. Louis, and I think it has to be frustrating for him too that he has a good performance, the defense has a good performance, but again, the team doesn't show anything on the scoreboard. It has to be frustrating for him at point.
But he didn't get enough credit on the stat line. There was that, and there was two more opportunities towards the end of the game that Portland had. Multiple chances in the second half that I don't think he had credit for saves, because he came out and did so much where the ball was just put in the box. It wasn't necessarily a shot, but like these Superman punches that he had in the second half, I don't think the scoreline gave him credit for that, which is unfortunate, because that speaks to we talked about Totland earlier not getting credit for some of the things that he was doing to shut down Rodriguez on the scoreline and having it show up on stats. Bürki did the same kind of thing throughout, where he was putting himself in position to effectively save goals, but it wasn't a legitimate shot. And so when you look at his saves, that's why we look at specific stats like saves and say it doesn't tell the full story. You have to look at not just the match replay, but you have to look at some of these underlying metrics to see what effect a player truly had on the game. And so this takes us to the end of the first half. And like I said, I felt like the beginning of the game, at least halfway through, up until at 34 minutes or so, St. Louis was clearly the better team. They were on the offensive. They were having opportunities. The shots and the quality of shots weren't there. Even and this is going to be one of my takeaways, so spoiler alert for the end, even the ability to get a touch to generate a quality opportunity wasn't there. So we're almost taking a step back in a few regards. And that consisted through into the second half. But at the end of the first half, the possession was even 50-50, which is not exactly how St. Louis wants to be playing their game. St. Louis did win the XG battle pretty overwhelmingly, 0.49 to 0.25. Nothing massive on either side, but still, you could see all these stats telling the story of St. Louis having put themselves in a better opportunity, except for the expected goals on target, a stat that we've come to really enjoy on Flyover. Portland won this one in the first half, 0.29 to 0.12. And that speaks to the reason we mentioned things like Leuven's through ball to Klaus, where he wasn't able to get a touch to even generate a shot or a shot on target. Because if you look at the shots versus the shots that actually went on target and where they were on target to try and measure how effective and quality the shot was, St. Louis was pretty abysmal in that regard in the first half, despite the excitement generated, the balls being put in the final third, etc. So we go into the second half. And the second half picked up kind of where the first half was at its apex. Klaus intercepting a back pass just a few minutes in. Great timing on the jump. But if you look at the score line, he doesn't get a shot. There's really nothing that ends up with that. And it's the same story as we just said. It was you can't get a good first touch on it. You couldn't bring it in. Nothing comes of it, even an attempt for a shot on target. So all these stats that you look to as how effective and quality were the shots that St. Louis took, the last touch to generate a quality or generate a shot of any kind was poor for St. Louis last night. And this was one of the moments that was emblematic of that.
Yeah, and I know it's always a fraction of second, and looking at it on the replay is easier, but I think he could have tried to take the shot instead of trying to go around the goalkeeper. But obviously it's just a fraction of second that you have to make a decision. But yeah, that was a great chance. We had like last year we saw a few goals generated that way, and I thought this was going to be the first one this year, but he couldn't finish the chance.
You really saw a callback to the 2023 City team. Do you think that so what you said about Klaus and his decision making there, because I think it boils down to that decision making in the moment. Do you feel like this is a reflection of his confidence in his decision making capabilities? Right now, lack of goal scoring, lack of consistency. Whenever he does score a goal, he can't follow it up for a period of time. Does that seem like that's what's weighing on Klaus to you in that particular moment where it's shoot or attempt to retain the ball and work around a player for a better quality chance?
Yeah, I think yeah, just lack of confidence, and when you don't have confidence, you tend to overthink, and then you just get overwhelmed, and then just as I said, a fraction of a second. So if he was thinking about it too much, then he lost his chance to try to find a shot, and then he just tried to go around the goalkeeper. Which, by the way, when we talk on Thursday about Portland missing so many players, and I said, oh, usually somebody steps up, and hey, Panther is back backup goalkeeper for Portland Timbers. He did a great job last night, and I was impressed with the way he played as a sweeper, like outside of the box. It was nice to see an opposing goalkeeper playing that way, because I know we get to see Roman Berkey doing that a lot, but I was impressed with Pantemis just because he's the backup, and he did a great job last night.
Fatma made him their player of the match with a rating of 8, and he only had 2 saves credited to his name. If that doesn't describe everything we've been talking about of preventing St. Louis from even getting shots off and what the impact that he had was, then nothing will. And that's credit to him, because I mean, you can't take away what he did just because St. Louis wasn't able to be effective in their own game plan. There is another team that they play against. So for all the concerns and frustration we have on St. Louis's side, you do have to credit Portland and Pantemis for his work there. But after that Klaus moment early in the second half, I think we had one more pretty good opportunity that we'll get to. But the first sub came at 50 minutes, and you have to call this a sub, obviously, Yaro for Nilsson. But it wasn't a sub that Bradley Carnell wanted to make. So when you look at evaluating the second half subs, the tactical changes that Bradley Carnell made in the second half, you take this one away because it was an injury-related sub. Carnell said at the end of the game that with Nilsson and his knees, they're going to be cautious. Nilsson sustained a knock, and he was already on a yellow card. They were watching it in those first 5 minutes of the second half to see how he was. Carnell said he didn't see any clarity in his stride. And in the second half, later on, you could see Joakim Nilsson on the City bench with a bag of ice on his knee. So we hope that he's able to bounce back from this, and that the caution being shown, the precaution, pays off for St. Louis City, because you don't want to lose a player like Joakim Nilsson and what he offers in that center back line. Josh Yaro stood in and played a fantastic game. He kept going everything that Joakim Nilsson was doing, and I think that credits the depth that St. Louis center backs have, and you can have that true plug and play and be as effective on that back line as you were with Joakim Nilsson. So happy to see that. Santi, what I wasn't happy to see last night was the officiating. And I'm not going to harp too much on it because these are subjective calls in a lot of ways, but I will point to one specific moment, 67 minutes, where in the middle of the field, Celio Pompeu goes for a tackle. He gets ball. It's a very hard, very quick tackle. At first, I thought he might have gone studs up. And so I thought, okay, maybe studs up is the reason why he had a yellow card. They showed the replay in the stadium. I'm sure they showed it on Apple TV Plus. He had all ball. It seemed pretty clear. I wouldn't be surprised if this yellow was wiped away. But what did you make of the officiating? Because I feel we have to touch on it. It's a point of conversation in the fan base already. And because St. Louis had 21 fouls compared to Portland's 11, we had 6 yellow cards. It impacts next game, as we'll talk to in a minute. Did you make anything notable of the officiating specifically or not this Celio yellow at 67?
Yeah, that's Cellulo, definitely. When you look at the replay, he got the ball, but yeah, probably the ref was thinking he went studs up, and it was a aggressive play, and that's why he showed the yellow card. But yeah, too many fouls, too many interruptions. Some of the yellows, I think he was too quick to go with the yellows, and yeah, that's only Celios played. There were a few fouls that when you saw the replay, you could see St. Louis got the ball. But at least, yeah. Besides that, at least he didn't have anything to do with a goal disallowed or stopping a clear opportunity for either team. But yeah, I think the game itself, he just stopped it too many times, and too many yellows for a game that wasn't like that physical. Like if you look at the yellow cards at the end of the game, you will think, oh wow, this has been a really physical game. But I don't think it was. But yeah, I think he was too quick on some of those decisions.
Hard to say it was overly physical for a traditional St. Louis City style game. It started to get a little chippy at times, but yeah, I agree. Now, that's not to say that St. Louis didn't benefit from some of these foul calls and put themselves in good positions to earn those fouls. That moment in particular came at 73 minutes where Klaus had a little difficulty wrangling the ball. And during the game, I really liked what our friend Abby Styliano said from the St. Louis City Press. And she called what Klaus was going through last night the twisties. And it's borrowing a gymnastics term. And I felt like that was the absolute perfect description because it's not the yips. There was nothing there's nothing yippy about what Klaus was dealing with last night because that usually comes on shots or when you're trying to send the ball and you just don't have good touches on things. And this was Klaus not able to find positioning. And that, if you think about the other things we described in not able to get a touch, playing the ball around a keeper instead of trying to take a shot, I think this is calling Klaus last night having the twisties was a pretty perfect way to describe it. But it did draw a foul. It did help to keep the ball in a dangerous spot. And Klaus's twisties at 73 helped Leuven with his free kick opportunity. And this was the best chance for St. Louis in the second half by far. Maybe even the best actual chance in the entire game. It was pretty simple. Leuven set up for a free kick on the left side of City's attack, and he hit the left post. He went up over the wall, where I think this was, and Leuven said post-game that he changed his shot on this one to be more of a knuckleball, and credit to him because he learned from previous free kicks that hit the wall on what he needed to do and what Portland was giving him. So this was Leuven learning mid-game how to handle a Portland wall for his free kicks. It shows the value of multiple opportunities and your ability to learn from what the defense is giving you. And that's what a high-level player like Leuven will do. So he gets the ball up and over the wall. It hits the left post. It bounces right down behind the wall, right in the middle of the box. And Tim Parker, who is set up just to the right of the wall, finds himself with the ball in a perfect opportunity, but he ends up hitting a Timbers defender in the middle of the goal. I mean, this is a shot where if you put that ball anywhere else on target, it goes in, except for where Parker put it right there. And I am overly frustrated by the concept of this. But if you're going to rely on Tim Parker to be your goal scorer, you're going to have a bad time. And I think this was just the culmination of everything. Is St. Louis put themselves in a good spot here. They had to rely on a Tim Parker shot to not go in. And in general, this was probably the most frustrating piece of the game to me.
I agree 100%. And I go back to another chance he had on the first half on a corner kick that he ended up hitting with the shoulder. But you are spot on. When you had to go back and think that your best two chances were had by your center back, or at least two of the best chances, you have to reflect that something is going on and maybe something is wrong. And yeah, I'm not gonna say, oh, Tim Parker should have put that away. Yeah, he tried, but that's not
Yeah.
he's a center back. That's not his
Yeah.
job, you know?
Exactly, exactly. So we shift to the actual tactical subs, which started at 70 minutes. So this is part of the overall story of Bradley Carnell feeling, I would say, comfortable or confident in what his team was doing up until that point, that he didn't feel a need to make a tactical change until 70 minutes. And this was significant in a lot of ways, not just for the players that came on, but the players who didn't come on, honestly. Kyle Hebert's off on international duty with Canada. He's unavailable for St. Louis. He had started at left back here recently. And so with Anthony Marcanic starting at left back, the assumption going in is now if a change needs to take place on the left side, it's Nicholas Dewar. But that's not what we saw. We saw Akil Watts and AZ Jackson come in for Anthony Marcanic and Indiana Vasilev. Akil slotted right in on that left back side. AZ took the central attacking midfielder role, moving Kajima to the right. We kept our 4-2-3-1 shape. And an unfortunate takeaway from this is, where is Nicholas Dewar?
Yeah, and we talked about it on Thursday, and you actually asked a very insightful question during the presser, and you didn't ask about Nicolas Dewar specifically, but I think after seeing that Nicolas wasn't taken in consideration for the substitution, I think that tells at least part of the story, that he's basically like when you have to substitute mechanic and you go to Akil Watts, who it's usually plays right back, and yeah, he played in preseason. He played a couple of games
Mm-hmm.
as left back, so you could say, yeah, he has some experience. He's an option, but not going to Nicolas Dewar to me is very telling and paints a picture of the situation. And now we don't know if it is that he, as we alluded on Thursday, maybe he doesn't want to play City 2 to get those minutes, or maybe contract or his agent, something doesn't allow him to play those minutes. And I think putting Akil Watts instead of him just kind of proves the point that something is going on with him.
It's really hard to draw any other conclusion. And if you didn't get to hear our conversation on Flyover Footy last week in our preview show, we did discuss the concept of players going down from City to City 2. Nicholas Dewar was not mentioned by name. Purposefully did not ask Bradley Carnell about Nicholas Dewar because I wanted to draw more of a conceptual answer. I didn't want to ask specifically about one single player because you're more likely, in my opinion, to get an answer of, I'm not going to talk about any individual decisions made type of a thing. You're not going to throw a player under the bus. And I think that's what every City fan wants. You don't want your coach to throw a player under the bus.
Right.
But if you ask these conceptual questions, right? We did hear from Carnell last week saying that there is more into it than just the coach asking the player. And Carnell even said he can't force a player to play for City 2. There are other mitigating circumstances at play. There's the player wanting to play. That's first and foremost. There's the player's agent. There's the players association. There's contracts. We don't know what any of these factors might play into with Nicholas Dewar, other than the fact that he's not playing for City 2 at the same time that he's not playing for City. You have a guy like Akil Watts, who does play for City 2 here and there to get his minutes, to stay fresh. And now he's playing for City. You heard Bradley Carnell have positive things to say about Akil in the last game that he started. So this is a progression for Akil, just like it is a continued question mark, frustration, alarm bells going off about Nicholas Dewar. And now as we're approaching the halfway point of the season, you have a tough time of just saying he's still acclimating. I think we've gotten past that point, or at least we should be past that point, where if it's not acclimation, it's something else. And all these different pieces play into that. And I looked back on what I could find on the last things we heard on Nicholas Dewar, because we've asked about him in the past, in the recent past, and going back to when we saw him against FC Cincinnati. Before that game, I asked Bradley Carnell about Nicholas Dewar, and Carnell had said things like, We would have liked to get Nicholas on the field a little bit more. It's been slow. We're just trying to push him along, encourage him. At that point, he was referring to Tomas Ostrak in 2022 for City 2 in an international player like that coming on and the acclimation. So we gave a little credit to that process. We didn't know what we may know now about the City 2 piece, but then even after the FC Cincinnati game, Dewar had a pretty good defensive game, but he didn't do anything on the ball or in the attack. And Carnell referenced that post-game of FC Cincinnati, saying there weren't too many opportunities, basically looking at Nicholas Dewar's forward motion. We didn't have a lot to talk about, but Bradley Carnell was really talking about they're looking for their fullbacks to go forward, for positivity in that forward movement, and they're going to help Dewar acclimate and work with him to feel comfortable in the system, in the attack, right? So it's not like a cultural thing. It's not getting settled in St. Louis type of a thing. That was the last that we heard. And so when we do ask, we hear some of the same things. We really have to trust our eyes in what we're seeing and reading between the lines of what Carnell tells us of City and City 2, in addition to the eye test. Now seeing that Hebert's gotten a start at left back. Marcanic continues to start at left back. Akil is subbing in at the left back role. And Nicholas Dewar is only finding that here and there time when maybe others need rest. I'm not sure what other conclusions to draw on this. And I don't want to harp on it too much more, but I think that everything we've talked about needs to be said because it is and it should be a focal point given the expectations that we had bringing Dewar in, as well as being brought in right alongside Thomas Totland. And we know the impact he's having on the right side.
Yeah, Nicholas Dewar came to camp a little later. So yeah, you could say, okay, he didn't have a full preseason. And when Bradley Carnell made those remarks about him still needing some time to get acclimated, that was like 7-8 match days ago. So
Yeah.
it's been a few weeks. But I think the part about not playing with CD2, we don't know what the situation is, but I think that's part of it because you see guys going down to CD2. You mentioned Akil Watts, even Jose Kijima, even Jay Nerwinski had a game with CD2. I actually saw him after that game, and he seemed very happy and very pleased with his performance. I mentioned, yeah, I just needed to get some minutes. But yeah, the fact that Nicholas Dewar is not playing, and again, we don't know, it just delays his opportunities, his acclimation to the team on the offensive phase, and yeah, it's now it's a question mark. It's interesting. On Thursday when I was thinking about my lineup, Matt, I wasn't sure about Marcanic, and I thought about putting Akil Watts as left back instead of Nicholas Dewar. So, and myself, I'm already in that mindset that he's not a reliable option at this point.
You're an oracle, really foreseeing the future here, Santi. I'm going to have to ask you to give us some more of your predictions and tips as we go. But unfortunately, in the rest of this game, I mean, it wasn't much. It's not worth dwelling on a lot. Sam came in at 80 minutes for Jose Kijima, so the shape really didn't change a lot. Sam moved up front, Klaus a little underneath, second striker maybe, 4-2-3-1 stayed consistent. Portland threatened late with a couple shots. I mentioned earlier, Roman Berkey had some Superman-type punches on the ball to clear them. But overall, the second half was very subdued. City led in shots 5-3, but there was only one recorded shot on target, and that was Tim Parker's 74-minute shot after Leuven's corner. So there wasn't a lot to read into this in the second half. But we go into our passing networks and a new stat that we're going to be talking about on here called goals added. This replaces, if you look on X, there's an account, MLS STAT, that posts post-game images, and they pull together stats from Opta and from American Soccer Analysis. Great sources that he collates and puts together for teams. And that's what we love to talk about. You'll see a lot of discussion on these online, on podcasts, I'm sure. But replacing expected threats, which just looks at more how threatening is the pass that you're playing, whether it's a progressive pass, it's passing behind you, it's passing out of or into dangerous areas. They are now looking at goals added. Goals added measures a player's total on-ball contribution in attack and defense. It does this by calculating how much each touch changes the team's chances of scoring and conceding across two possessions. So the example of this is The moment a player receives the ball at midfield, their team might have a 1.5% chance of scoring on the possession, but also a 1% chance of conceding on the next possession. That situation is not very valuable. But if they play a through ball from there to the final third, that puts the team in a much better situation and might have a 6% chance of scoring and now a 0.5% chance of conceding. So you take that what that pass would be worth in the difference to the team's situation. It's very complex in the model and the analysis and the algorithm that goes into putting these numbers together. But just think of it as how a player is contributing offensively and defensively to the chances of them scoring a goal, goals added, right? And so it looks at the defensive just as it looks to the offensive. And I think that's why it's super valuable to look at as opposed to the expected threats. So you look at goals added for this game, team wise, St. Louis had 1.29 offensive goals added and 0.9 defensive goals added. They were higher than Portland. Portland 0.7 offensive, 0.6 defensive. St. Louis, if you look at this type of underlying number, produced more chances throughout the field. And this stat doesn't take into consideration shots. It just takes into consideration the probability of a successful outcome, essentially, from each play. And that's why it's really fun because we can be frustrated at the end of the day about the quality chances, the actual touches on a final shot. But this stat pulls it back a little bit and looks holistically down the field. Individual players, you're talking positive goals added from Chris Durkin, who led the team, Edu Leuven, who is second, Thomas Totland, who is third, Tim Parker fourth, Celio Pompeu fifth, and those are the only players who had positive goals added. Keep in mind, this is an offensive and a defensive stat. So does that help reinforce what the eye test told you, Santi, of Durkin, Leuven, Totland, Parker, and Celio were basically the players who helped City on and off the ball in putting themselves in better chances to score goals?
Yes, that confirms what we saw during the game, which makes me think. And I don't know if you skipped the passing network on purpose or maybe forgot about it, but I wanted to talk to you about Jose Kijima, who started
Yep.
yesterday and he earned those minutes. But and I have this debate with Hector on our pregame show. He was saying Kijima, yeah, he was put in that position like at second midfielder, but
Yep.
he wasn't really playing as that against Miami. It was more a defensive position, and he made me think about that a lot. And then during the game, and now seeing the passing network where he was, it confirms, like, yeah, in theory, he's that number 10, but it's not really a number 10 when you think about playmaking and creating chances.
Where was he, Santi? We're on audio podcast, so help our listeners out. Where was Jose Kojima's average position on the passing network for St. Louis City?
He was basically right at midfield, and if you look at other players, you see Basilev and Celio further down,
Mm-hmm.
and then even this is Edward Leuven. Even Leuven, who is supposed to be playing as a defensive midfielder, he is a little bit higher than Jose Kijima.
Leuven and Durkin. Kojima's average position on the passing network for St. Louis was, at least through when Joachim Nilsson had to sub out, was in the defensive half of St. Louis. And Durkin was just overlapping him. Leuven was about central, if not higher. And you had Klaus, Celio, and Vasilev all much higher. And I think this is an issue in connecting the lines, and it may go into why we had such a difficulty in finding that final touch. There was a lot of passing being done between Leuven and Totland and Durkin and Marcanic. In those, these areas, we create triangles and we try to create overloads on our wings to progress the ball. And in the overall passing networks, you look at how the ball ended up in the final third in a lot of different areas, and it was through the wings. In fact, is as far as passes into the final third, 56% of them came on the right side. So we're sending the ball to Thomas Totland an overwhelming amount in trying to create those chances to find a final pass to get a shot on goal. But Jose Kojima in particular, we walk away with this as a big positive in how he made you feel, in what his actions were off the ball, especially because going into the first half where he had that crucial moment of intercepting, high pressing. A lot of what we actually say AZ does pretty good. Because if you look at historical games with AZ Jackson this year, you do have to credit his press. You have to credit his ability to force the opposition to be, I would say, out of their comfort zone and to create chances in the gegenpressing. You can be frustrated with his on the ball work, and you should be, AZ Jackson, that is. But Jose Kojima, I think, gave us a similar look here. In fact, if you look at the overall touches by players, Jose Kojima had 20 total touches in 80 minutes of work. That was one of, if not the lowest field players for St. Louis City. And juxtapose that against AZ Jackson, who came in at 70 minutes. He had 9 touches in 20 minutes. So Jose Kojima, 20 total touches in 80 minutes. AZ Jackson, 9 touches in 20 minutes for a position that they played the same. AZ moved Jose out when he subbed in for that 10 minutes. So something has to change in the utilization of the 10 here. If they're going to continue to play a 4-2-3-1, defensively, it works. Defensively, that number 10 position, when they step up, it's working to disrupt the opposition. It's working to create turnovers. AZ, Indy, Jose Kojima, they're all effective in that 10 role in the defensive work, off the ball. But when St. Louis has the ball, their combination of not utilizing the 10 in build-up play, but also having it just be this vacuum in the midfield where you don't know where the 10 is at any given time. They're sending the ball long, and Bradley Carnell mentioned post-game that they utilize second chances, and they were very frustrated about the number of second chances that they had to work off of and the quality in their second chances. But that plays to what the number 10 in our offense needs to do. If the ball is being sent long to Klaus or Salio or even Indiana Vassilev on the right side, there needs to be another underneath player for them to play the ball off to if that's your mindset. If your tactical approach is leveraging these second chances on aerial duels, sending the ball long, that's where your number 10 comes into play. That's where this center attacking midfielder helps to recover the ball and needs to be that quick playmaker in finding one pass. We're not talking about a number 10 that play makes in multiple passes in the attacking third, but this core concept of what the 10 does is not being done effectively by St. Louis, in my opinion.
Yeah, and maybe that's the way St. Louis wants to use that number 10. And Kojima did great against the ball. And actually, Brad Carnell highlighted that on Thursday when I asked him about Kojima's development, and he mentioned that he has shown great things against the ball, and his work rate also has been great. But yeah, just not seeing that traditional playmaking. Not only him, but the way we have used that position this season with that formation tells the story, and maybe that's the way we want to use it. But that shows also on the amount of plays, the amount of chances the team creates, and where they come from. So not sure if we will see some changes in that regard. And the other thing I wanted to mention, this passing network is through the 49 minute, which is when Joakim Nilsson was subbed. But then later on have, I don't know, Matt, if you noticed that, but Kojima, at least from what I saw, he was being used based a second striker, which when you mentioned the substitution, Sam Adeniran, the substitution for Sam Adeniran to go in wasn't until late in the game, 80th minute. And just seeing Kojima being used as a second striker, at least in my opinion, I would have liked to see Adeniran earlier.
Yeah, it's you have to go to the tactical decisions that Carnell made in the timing of them. The actual subs, Dewar notwithstanding for his own issues, you don't really have any issues with subbing AZ in for the role that he is used to playing in the center attacking mid, subbing Sam in for Jose at the second striker spot. They all make sense in where you're putting players positionally, but Sam didn't show us anything in the final 10 minutes or so. The best opportunity I think I saw him have was a far post miss from a cross on the right side that came late, where nobody was back post for a cross that I think Thomas Totland sent in. But when that cross came, you saw Sam fade back to try and get his head on the ball, and he couldn't get his timing. There's there's just question marks overall about the usage, I think, of Sam Adeniran right now. And we don't know what plays into that. There's more that happens on teams than obviously what we see on the field. So it could be a myriad of things that are going on here. But I do agree with you that something needs to change. Something new needs to be attempted, whether it's personnel, formation, 4-4-2, or whatnot. More verticality with numbers up may be the answer, because you can't have those second chances be your focal point if you're not having anybody recover those effectively. That said, there are some positives to look at into this. Individual positives, I would say, if nothing else, because I don't think the system in and of itself was a positive at all. Edu Leuven led the team with 10 crosses, led the team with 4 shots, had some of the best shot creating opportunities. He was third in XG, first in expected assists. With his set piece work has been a game changer for St. Louis City in giving us some of the biggest offensive opportunities that we've had. And that is absolutely something we were missing when he was out. Thomas Totland, we talked about him earlier, shut down Jonathan Rodriguez for large portions of the game. He led the team with 3 tackles. He had 4 duels won. So the work that he did on and off the ball in not just shutting down one of their designated players, but also creating a lot of opportunities. We mentioned his goals added was 3rd highest on the team. Thomas Totland continues to impress. And then obviously Roman Berkey, man of the match, for lack of a better term. What else are you going to do when you have a 0-0 draw? His 5th clean sheet of the season. He earned this 4 matches earlier than it took him to get to that same mark last season. So he's on pace to have more clean sheets this year than he did last year. The unfortunate things are too long to list. We're not going to list all of them because I feel we've talked about them at one point or another. But a takeaway to this one, though, Santi, is we are now without the services of Chris Durkin next week against FC Dallas, as he has been suspended for yellow card accumulation. This was his 3rd yellow card in the last 4 games after picking up 4 earlier in the season. He had a stretch of 5 or 6 where he had 1 forgiven, but now with these recent yellow cards, that's back on the table. Tim Parker, Thomas Totland, and Celio Pompeu all have 4 yellows, so they're towing that line of 1 away from a suspension as well. But if you want to see more Jabulu Blom, you might want to tune into that FC Dallas game. If you want to see more Jose Kojima, he's no doubt going to be needed with the depleted midfield of Chris Durkin. One thing I will add, Santi, and I'm curious your thoughts on this before we finish up the show. Bradley Carnell mentioned last week that if he didn't see what he wanted to see, he mentioned, I think, a few games, then he would be looking to City 2. He mentioned Brendan McSorley very specifically. I think Caden Glover is always in the mind of people on how and when he's going to be used for St. Louis City. But when you think of this match, when you think of Durkin not available, obviously Alm and Ostrak are still out, are you thinking that it may just be a matter of time before we see a City 2 player called up for a short-term loan, or do you think that next week might be that time?
Week, just because Chris Dorkin won't be available. And the other question mark, you mentioned that Joachim Nilsson was seen with a bag of ice on the sideline, on the bench. So if maybe he needs to rest, we could see another Michael Wenzel call up. But on the offensive side, yeah, Brendan McSorley, even John Klein, who keeps scoring. Not sure about Caden Glover, because he started this week for C2, but it was his first start in a while, so I'm not sure if he was injured or something else going on, but I don't think it will be an option, just thinking about next week.
All right, so our takeaways seem pretty clear on this one. Kojima had great work, but our number 10 position seems to be a little underutilized. Big question mark in how we're using that in our system. We can't overlook the defensive work. Portland came into this touted as one of the best offensive teams in MLS. They were on pace to have their best goals per 90 in their club's history, and we held them scoreless. We shut them down. Massive positive for our defensive work, but the final third is a mess. There were as many issues in the quality chances on goal as there were in getting quality touches on the ball to even have a chance at attempting a shot. So I don't know if you can say there's one step forward with Inter Miami and then 2 or 3 steps back with Portland, but that's really what it feels like offensively at the moment. So St. Louis struggling to find answers in how they can finish off and even get a final touch on to finish off some of these chances they're putting themselves in the final third. Going forward, Santi, I don't know how you want to look at this, but despite it all, we're both tied for the fewest wins in MLS. but we're also just 3 points out of a playoff spot in the West. 11th place, we remain with only 4 matches on this week, but we're just a few points behind the Portland Timbers for that 9th spot, just 3 points. 2 games in hand on Portland. You could see that there's still a way to turn this around. The games are dwindling. I mentioned on X that it feels like the clock is going to run out if they continue at their current work rate and pace in how many points per game they can accrue. But being 3, 4, and 9 on the season, 23 goals scored through 18 games, it's 10th most in the West. There's a problem with the attack. It's obvious. Our defensive side is keeping us in this and making it possible that we could still make a run and still find ourselves in a good playoff spot at one point later this season. But it is hard to see the forest for the trees at this point in time.
Yeah, it's difficult to see what's going on. A good opportunity against Dallas on Saturday, which I'm gonna say that's another. I think at this point, all of these games, especially against conference opponents, are 6 points games, and just against Dallas, who is second to last on the table. I think City has to get a result. Hopefully, something better than a draw. And just last night, that scoreless draw, I thought about the game against Miami. Like if City had gotten those 3 points, maybe yesterday's draw will have not seen as bad. But yeah, just makes you think about some of those missed opportunities during the season where the team get away in the last 10 minutes. But it is what it is, and yeah, like the table is so tight that the team is still in contention. But Dallas and then the next two home games back to back, you have to start seeing some wins just to stay on course and don't let that number 9 position get away. And the other thing, yeah, 8 and 9 make it to the playoffs, but remember that's a playing game where anything can happen. It will be better to to finish at least in 7 positions, so at least you have that chance to go 2 out of 3 games.
Very good point. And with the prevailing thought being that the attack is a mess and there are issues that we have to fix there, it's still a long ways away before we have the services of Cedric Toyhert available to us. And it's something City's going to have to figure out in the interim to remain competitive when he's able to join. If anyone else is able to join, that Lutz might be signing, because Lutz said that he wasn't done after Toyhert, and with Girdwood Reich being the only additional signing, we hope that, especially with the loss of Ostrak and Alm, there are people on the big board of Lutz's that may be coming in the transfer window. But we got to get there. We have to be able to get there. We have to be able to find a way to score goals consistently. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough time as we head into Leagues Cup. So FC Dallas next week. Santi, we're going to be back on Thursday to preview it all. I'll be back with a midweek pod this week to look at some news and notes from training as we hear from Carnell midweek. Anything else to add on this one, Santi, before we go?
No, that's it from me. Looking forward to the next podcast, previewing Dallas, which will be another important game, and hopefully we start getting 3 points very soon.
The team's on to Frisco, and the urgency to get 3 points remains and escalates with every single match. That's all for us here at Flyover Fallout. Thanks for joining us on this look at the 0-0 draw against the Portland Timbers. Santi, appreciate your time. Everybody have a good rest of the weekend and a good start to the week. We will talk to you later.